Hi, everyone. Happy Monday, and thanks for joining us for another exciting AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. Today, we are very, very excited to welcome back Margaret Brodie, CEO of Rubicon Organics. We're going to spend some time talking through what is going on the premium side of the Canadian market, as well as how changes are happening across the globe, especially in the US, as well as focusing on some highlights from some fantastic earnings that recently were announced. So we're going to walk through it all today. Lots to cover as always. Margaret, you're always great to have on, so I appreciate you taking the time. If you're out there, I mentioned in the comments, if you have questions, comments you want to drop, you're always welcome to put them in the chat. It's a great way to connect directly and kind of get answers, where you can ultimately. See Stevie in there. Great to see you, Stevie. All right. Well, with all that said, Margaret, how's your week starting off? Got to be good, I would imagine, right?
It's lovely always to present record net revenue growth, 30% year to date compared to last year.
Keep it easy.
Yeah, I keep it easy breezy, not been busy at all. Look, really, really proud of our team for delivering those results. I think it's just fantastic. And I think we are here to say Canadian cannabis is back. For those who haven't been watching, there's a group of companies you want to watch. We're one of them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I do want to dig into those in a little bit more depth as we get in along the way. But I first kind of wanted to start with kind of what's happening on a global scale. I know there's been a lot of chatter on the US and kind of what is maybe going to change here. President Trump last week giving a timeline of just a couple of weeks on rescheduling. Would love to kind of get a sense of, what that means. What's the impact for the Canadian market and operators like Rubicon?
Yeah, great. Look, anything that brings eyeballs back to the space is absolutely fantastic. We definitely feel the cold, long Arctic winter that we have had for the last 3-4 years in Canadian cannabis. But in that time, companies like ours just got down to business. Focus, build, knowing that the global trend is that marijuana, cannabis is looking towards moving forward everywhere. We're seeing that in developments in the EU, Australia, around the world. Thrilled to hear that there's hope for some changes in the US and helping our compatriots down there fighting the good fight in the cannabis industry. What I think this is going to do is bring eyeballs back to the space. But hey, look, what we've experienced since January, I would say, is we've been saying since then, there's a global supply shortage and countries are turning on, and we're not only getting inbounds from investors around the world, but also inbounds specifically from value investors that were looking at the space and saying, wait a minute, you guys are delivering these results. You've got this growth path ahead of you, and you're trading down here in these tiny multiples. This is going to change. So they've been seeding themselves. So we've really noticed that in our volumes and various things. I think this is now just going to be the potential for those people from the value perspective, plus people coming back, taking a look at cannabis again, who just had a stink in their nose. We're here to say we'd love to chat.
That's fantastic. So yeah, I think from a consumer perspective and obviously from an investor perspective, it seems to kind of widen the landscape out, which is great. And again, I think to be someone that's differentiated and is pulling out some pretty great numbers, that makes a difference. And that's kind of well-timed ultimately, although you always want to see that. So maybe let's spend some time kind of walking through that record quarter that you guys just announced. We'd love to kind of get a walkthrough of some of the highlights. I know you mentioned a few, but would love to get into a little more depth.
Absolutely. Look, we delivered record net revenue, 15 million, up 24% year over year, 30% year to date growth on the prior year, adjusted EBITDA of 1.4, 2.1 on year to date, positive operating cash flow and net profit. That's just the financial performance in the second quarter. We closed a new facility, strategic expansion, very excited, adding about 40% of production capacity to our business. Now, we're waiting on our license from Health Canada. It should be, before the end of the year. And we're going to see the revenues from that then expected in the first half. Love that. We got a deal done in April, time of crazy volatility, markets moving all over the place. It was oversubscribed twice. Very, very pleased with that. And we launched into a whole new format of all-in-one products. So we've been busy and we're continuing to solidify our position in the Canadian market. So we want to be your trusted, consistent brand, and showing that there are companies that can deliver consistent premium products time and time again. with new genetics. So not always the same thing, not turning out a widget, but doing it in a difficult way and showing that we are the organic leader in the world. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And again, I think to see those numbers, you've been getting, like you were saying, revenue up 24%. I think huge numbers, big sort of change of tone, I think, ultimately for some producers in the space to be able to put up numbers like that. And hopefully, I think we see the investor element kind of follow along. Even looking year to date at sort of stock performance, that's been a fantastic story for Rubicon. I think we've talked about it in the past, but what specifically would you attribute the ability to put out numbers, put out growth kind of in this way that sets you guys apart to be able to do it that maybe some others might not be able to in the same way?
We talk about elevated experiences. So when we talk about that, it is not only consistent quality in our product, it's how you interact with our team. We want a high-performing culture that delivers all the time, gets better every day. We never want to let down a consumer or customer, and we want to be great customer to our suppliers. And so that there's a hustle in that, and there's a grit in that, and there's a desire to get better rather than just phoning it in every day. We've got people on our team that deliver that, and I'm pushing that, and our leadership team is pushing that every day. So I think that delivers a brand promise. We are looking to build brands that are on shelf for 30 years, and we're on our way. We really see that. The first thing that I say to all of our customers is we want to be your top rated supplier.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's fair. I think it's a simple concept, but again, hard to achieve and deliver. But again, I think you've been doing that, which is great. I did want to check in just sort of on the earnings side, just because we've talked about it in the past, sort of the different form factors and kind of what's done well. I know we had been talking earlier in the year sort of about the vape side of things and how that had been coming along. Would love to kind of check in on that side as well.
Great. We had, there's two interesting trends in Canadian cannabis that I think we thought would happen, but surprised us how quickly in the data it's showing up. One is that there's a move from a 510 cart, which is where you attach a cart into a battery to consume, and you can change out your flavor, to a all-in-one, which is, take it off the shelf. You don't even need to charge the thing, and it's ready to go. We've just entered the all-in-one category. There, for the first time, is vape overall as a category is growing, but 510 is down a bit in the first half, and all-in-one is taking share. So we're excited to have entered that category. We've started with 1 SKU. We'll have 4 in market by the end of the year. And that's overall market, not necessarily our growth, because we're obviously seeing growth in vape. You can see it in our numbers. And then secondly, in Canada, pre-rolls have overtaken flower for the first time. So to me, there's a consumer story there, which is I finally am trusting the brands in the flower, and I'm moving towards convenience, which we've seen in, many other industries. But in cannabis, I think there was such this trust around, I need to see the flower and I don't trust what's in the pre-roll. We've seen that with pre-rolls across the board. I'm very excited about it.
That's fantastic. How much would you also maybe read into that as being kind of more people being willing to try cannabis and maybe using it in the factors that they understand more? I think people coming in who love cannabis and are deep into the flower and, looking at the structure and color and everything, care a lot about those subtle changes and those differences there, versus being able to access it, still getting high quality, still getting different flavors, the right blend and mix, but in kind of more familiar, ultimately kind of forms. What do you mean?
Adoption is hard to talk about in terms of new consumers. There certainly are. It's difficult to quantify. I think what we're seeing more is a shift from the legacy market into the legal market, because those consumers already exist. So what we've seen is early days, 2017, 2018, heavy consumers came into the legal market. It was expensive. They were disappointed. They went back to the legacy market, the illicit market. Now there's an estimation. It's somewhere between big numbers, 20 to 40% are still in the illicit market. What we are starting to see, though, is people buying more now from both. So they buy depending on price, depending on convenience, and all of the rest of that. And then new consumers, so Gen Z entering to the cannabis market, really only having purchased in the legal market. So if you think about what's the biggest white space opportunity of existing consumers, the new consumer doesn't consume that much. So yes, there's new people coming in, but they're not heavy consumers. The largest opportunity is existing consumers in the illicit market. And so we'd like to welcome them in and provide opportunities and products that satisfy them at the right price, that has awesome quality and strains that they love. That's our focus.
That's fantastic. I think I have seen some stats in terms of sort of graduating from the illicit market into the more legal framework. And that seems to be a trend that's continuing kind of broadly. So again, I think that's probably built on the same things that you're talking about, where it is having that consistent experience, premium, ultimately. So that's fantastic there. Was just curious. Seeing a question from, just to throw it in because it's timed in well with talking about form factors.
Yeah.
Max is asking, what about edibles? Any plans there? I think there are.
We are the leader in premium edibles in Canada. We've got
Nice.
26% of the premium market in edibles. We were the first company to launch live rosin edibles into the Canadian market. Under 1964, we now have strain-specific ones in Simply Bare as well. It's a form factor that is incredibly popular, but it's still a relatively small part of the legal market. It's being held down in Canada by the THC limit of individual packs being 10 milligrams. There are some changes coming where you can do a multi-pack where each 10 milligram item is individually packaged.
Sure.
There's some ways to go with that market. A lot of people that are heavy consumers are still buying in the illicit market there. So, I'd love to see the government open up. I think that will create a much different opportunity. And I think it'll bring, if one of the government's aims is to reduce the illicit market and organized crime, then this edibles is one of the ways that they need to do that. Changing the rules.
I think that makes sense, making it easier for legal operators to attract their audience and making it less compelling to be on the illicit side. I think that makes sense perfectly. So I guess the plan is continuing to be the number one brand, I think, in edibles would be the goal and answer to that, I think, ultimately. All right. Well, then I did want to talk about, you mentioned the Hope facility, and I think we talked about that in the past. Would love to get an update there. You said, seems like working through the process to get that done. What's the sort of time estimate, impact, all those things? Would love to hear about that.
Great question. I have been given some feedback that we need to change the name of Hope, because a cannabis CEO talking about hope is really not a great, so there'll be more to watch this space. It's located in Hope, BC. So that's why we call it Hope. But it is not a hope. It is a real thing. And we're very proud and excited. We own the facility now. We're awaiting licensing from Health Canada. I don't see any impediments to us getting that license. We expect it before the end of Q4, but obviously regulators have the right to take their time and make sure that things are done properly, and we respect that. But look, it's going to cost us $1 to $2 million in OPEX this year, and we're going to spend about $1.5 million this year in CapEx. Once we get the license, though, we do expect that we'll be able to start growing fairly quickly. There might be a little bit of CapEx to do, but it's not more than a couple of weeks. So we should be able to get moving, and we're going to see revenues from that in the first half of next year, we expect, unless something goes wrong, which you never know. But look, I'm very eager to get it ramped up. What I'm particularly excited about is it's an indoor facility, and we operate in a hybrid greenhouse today, proving that a hybrid greenhouse can deliver a premium flower at very good cost. And so it's about the system and the grower, and not necessarily about the facility. But this facility was growing premium BC weed. It was the first licensed facility in BC. And I think there's going to be strains that grow really well in there that didn't love the hybrid environment. So we're pretty excited, and we're pretty excited to start pumping it out, chomping at the bit.
That's great. So it sort of ultimately widens what you potentially can do. Again, I know you guys are often innovating and trying to find new strains, but that gives you another little layer of what you could potentially grow in fully indoor. Ultimately, it sounds like, is that right? Absolutely.
And look, we want to be not just the Canadian leader in genetics. We want to be the global leader in genetics. I think it's a story that is going to be something that can be monetized in 3+, 5+ years. But we're building on our genetics house and our library. Very excited about what we have coming down the pipe. The new drops started this year. We've seen awesome reception to them. And watch this space. More to come.
Yep, that's awesome. All right, I like the teaser. All right, I'm seeing some questions. I do want to kind of talk about sort of the landscape in general and how Rubicon fits in, but seeing some interesting questions here again from Max. Does Rubicon have any U.S. exposure?
We do not. Yeah, great question, Max. We did back in we started as a US company, actually. Our top co was US, and we built a facility in Washington State. We have great friends and connections down in the US, but we decided to focus on the Canadian market. You never know what happens in future.
Yeah. All right. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Not a hint. That is a maybe, you never know. I think for us, there is so much still to do in Canada, and the opportunity to go international. The inbounds we're getting are insane, and it's going to be a fun next couple of years, I can say.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, so maybe tell us a little bit more about that. I know we've talked in the past about the focus being on Canada, doing it really well in one focused area, and then sort of looking around, but not being super eager just to jump kind of everywhere. What can you tell us sort of about that focus ultimately, even in the face of Germany or maybe the US? We'll see.
Yeah. Look, we're focused people. We are interested in playing in premium and winning in premium, full stop. We've explored some other things. You always have to kick the tires and have a look. We'd be fools not to, but all of the kicking of tires has reinforced to us that we are doing the right thing for our competitive advantage and where we have a right to win. That being said, more capacity and more the turn on of this new site is our number one priority and focus, because it's a great demonstration of our ability to take what we do and do it more than once and scale. So to me, this is the first step in where Rubicon can be in 5 years' time, and very keen to demonstrate that it's repeatable, what we do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think having that process and being able to, like you're saying, replicate it a ton and just kind of continue to lean into that success ultimately is the way to go. I'm seeing another question here, which is interesting. Do you think Canada, like the US, has suppressed tax reform to knock out the smaller companies? Otherwise, I wouldn't understand why both countries have slow play tax reform. It's an interesting question, I think, also just sort of given how Canada maybe has come about. I know there were a lot of distressed companies, and maybe that's, again, to the advantage of the ones that are able to hash it out. What can you kind of say on that front?
Ontario government released a report. I actually have it on my desk, and I haven't finished all the facts, but the amount that cannabis is building our GDP is incredible. We're larger than the dairy industry. There's almost 100,000 people employed in the legal cannabis sector in Canada. These are huge statistics. And the government is making a lot of money on cannabis right now. I don't think that there was necessarily a wait for the shakeout to occur. Potentially there was. I was asked those questions when I did sit with government twice. I was asked, do you think the shakeout has finished, and why hasn't there been more consolidation? People asking a question is not their worldview. I think there will be tax reform at some stage in Canada. I think it was an error. The 10% or over $10, or $1 per if under $10. But I think we're giving government too much credit. I just think that they don't have attention on the file. I think there are bigger files, and in particular, what's happening right now in the world, whether it's around security, food security, wildfire, settling some trade agreements. They're just not focused on cannabis, and it's not a priority. So let's not, I'd love us to say, yes, they've got some big plan. I just think that the Canadian government has bigger fish to fry. But our time will come. And when we continue to put out the stats that we do in terms of our contribution to economy, speak with one voice as an industry, we will make change.
Yeah, being bigger than the dairy industry is baffling. That's huge. How long? I mean, when did that takeover happen? That must have been in the past.
I don't know. I only heard that stat this year. So I think it's a 2024 stat. I love it because people go,
wow,
I eat a lot of cheese. I drink a lot of milk.
Yeah.
But look, we are going to, when you contribute to a country's GDP, you start to get traction. And Canada is currently the home of quality going into the international markets. There are lots of other participants in the international markets, but we have the consistent quality supply. But not everybody has the premium quality supply, I might add, but decent quality supply that we should be proud of. And so I think that the government's going to take notice when the stats on exports continue to grow. They're going to have to.
Yep.
It's going to be economic, right?
Yeah. I think that is sort of the story of cannabis. I think as it's built, it's sort of been something that can't be ignored any longer in terms of what, medical benefits or just people wanting something else to be able to use and enjoy. And so again, I think that's been kind of a story generally, as well as obviously the economic contributions or the jobs, all those things make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
For sure. All right. Well, then sort of looking ahead to the future and how things are kind of moving along. It seems like, again, very staying focused in Canada, keeping an eye on the opportunities abroad, but again, not being fast to move, trying to really focus in on finding that repeatable process with the hope, which again, may be renamed. We'll see.
New facility with your new site.
With the new site. But sort of just looking ahead, you know, with, I guess, with some of the offerings that are coming out, I don't know, what are people responding to, reacting to? What can you kind of speak to on that front?
Look, we are in a moment in Canada where the shelf has been built. Now, I said last year the shelf was being built in the next 18 months. All of a sudden in June, at the beginning of June, I was thinking the shelf is still being built in terms of national brands. I think it's now occurred. Getting back on shelf, if you do not have a brand presence, is extremely difficult. This is a ground game, and I think I've said it here potentially before. It's almost like the Democrats and the Republicans, the amount of ground game that you have of years and years and years of work. We've had 7 years of this industry. If you have not got your brand on shelf nationally, it's going to be a very big challenge. The Ontario store, the biggest buyer in the country, has announced they're taking SKUs from, I can't recall today if it's 5,200 or 5,400, down to 4,500 SKUs by the end of the year. So there's a net loss of shelf space. So if you're not there, good luck. And so staying focused in Canada in the last 2 years, rather than pulling your product and distribution to get into the international markets, this is the leading, most competitive national market in the world. And it's competitive and advanced. So I'm very happy with our choice to stay in Canada. I think it was the right strategic choice. There's short-term profitability that you can chase, and that's always attractive. But we're here to build long-term brands. When we go internationally, we will take the same approach. We are, by the end of this year, I expect we'll have exported to 3-4 countries. We're learning on every one of those. How's the product received? Who's in market? Who do you trust? Who makes payment? I would say that there's a lot of people that are chasing shiny objects, and we're here to not necessarily be focused quarter over quarter, but look at the long game on how do you really win the war.
Yeah. Keeping focused, innovating, all those things really important. I did want to mention sort of, I know you kind of dropped some genetics into the market. I know the Simply Bare brand is kind of a way to do that. And I think it's been positively received. Can you talk about sort of why taking that approach as well? And sort of, is that different from what other companies are doing? Can you talk about that element as well?
Yeah, look, we've seen very few what we would call hero strains that have been consistent over the course of our lifetime. We've been very lucky. We have 2 or 3 hero strains within Rubicon that have stayed on shelf and continued to be bestsellers time and year after year after year. Mm-hmm. Typically, each company, you hope you at least have one. You should. But if you want to be a leading premium company, very similar to Cookies, Alien Lads, Strain Hunters in the US, you need to be dropping and leading with genetics. Look, most Canadian companies, our genetics are 3 to 5 years behind, and we're following trend. Rubicon's here to lead trend and set the standard, and we've been working on that for the last number of years. You can start to see that in the drops that are coming out from us, and leading trend and creating excitement and buzz around brand. We've seen fashion companies do it for years. It's no different in weed.
Yeah. All right. That's fantastic. Awesome. I'm seeing some good questions come in. Let me see if I can get some comments as well, which you might be able to speak to as well. Just sort of the trends of loyalty. People don't change often once they find what they like, and going to those 2-gram pods are big, besides the right type of edibles and drinks, and hoping for more. Yep. Choose, but already have some favorites. So kind of like what you're saying, even with the shelf space, of really trying to lock in early those customers that trust those consumers ultimately makes a difference in the long run. It's sort of an investment.
One of the things, I'd actually love to make a comment on that, because one of the things we find is you have your hero strains and things you go back to. Like I've gotten laughed at by a series of our advisors who say, "Why do you always talk about Blue Dream?" I'm like, because it's such a good strain, but it doesn't mean I'm not open to trying new things and being curious. So people have things they go back to in their lives that they're consistent with, whether it's kind of like going to the gym and you always do the leg press, but you still add in other activities. Your body and your mind and we're always looking for new experiences. So you have your heroes, but you try new things, and the cannabis consumer is like that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It sounds, I know we're comparing it kind of to other industries or other kind of companies. Ultimately, it does feel like kind of a restaurant. If you trust a restaurant, you might love their lasagna or whatever and get that all the time. But if you trust the actual restaurant itself, you might be open to try different stuff within that sort of restaurant umbrella. So I think that totally makes sense. It's the balance of comfort and also,
Excitement,
exploration,
right?
excitement. Yeah, trying new
And one of
things.
the things you can expect from Rubicon is when we put out a new genetic, it's going to be a beautiful expression of that strain. So you may choose, I don't really love that strain, but you're getting a fantastic experience, and we want to elevate that experience at every opportunity. You may say, God, please make this a hero strain and keep it in forever. We've had requests like that. We keep our library. We have dropped things back in. So we did a small drop in BC this spring of there were 2 genetics that were our very first, Creek Congo. We dropped it only into BC, and I think if you got it, and it's gone, because it creates brand lore and it's fun. And unfortunately, that genetic is not the highest yielder. So we also have to find that balance. But it's fun for our consumers and they love it. And that's important to us to answer their calls.
Yeah, no, I think in general, in terms of creating an interesting, exciting sort of experience, I think a lot of the times today in the modern world, if you want something, you can kind of get it all the time, and that kind of can take away some of the specialness or some of the excitement around it. So I think having those drops are a great way to kind of build that up. All right, let me see. I'm seeing some more questions from Gary, focused still on the international side, but he's asking, so when you go international, will companies like High Tide be a competitor or a user of your product?
Well, that's a good one. Well, firstly, big congratulations to Raj and the team over there. They're a great team, and I have a ton of respect for them. I think that they would likely be a purchaser from us rather than I haven't had that phone call yet because I don't believe the deal is closed. But I suspect that we will be getting some phone calls on would you provide us some product? We have a great relationship with that group. Very thrilled to see a Canadian company doing so well.
That's fantastic. All right, well answered. And then final question, which is, I know we'll tie into kind of what's coming next, but looking back a little bit, interesting question. How long have you worked in the cannabis industry, and what was your previous sort of getting more of a flavor of you?
Wow. I've been around 10 plus years. I just had my 10-year anniversary of Rubicon, which was my 10-year anniversary. So I was the first employee of Rubicon. People thought I was nuts. I thought it was exciting and interesting and an opportunity to build an industry. And that's exactly what we're doing. My background, I'm just an accountant. I'm a CPA, was with KPMG for many years, then went and worked in the mining sector for a very active group, much more investment banker style. I am not an investment banker, more business development CFO, cut my teeth there, learned a ton. Very proud of being part of a team like that. And they were a very successful group and wanted to build something. I'm not into moving money in circles. I'm into, or paper in circles as an accountant. I want to build. I want to grow. It makes me happy every day to think of all the people whose opportunities, we started out with nothing at a kitchen table and we have over 200 employees. And think of all the jobs and opportunity you create. I think the best thing you can do for your country is create economic development, and I'm very proud to do so.
That's fantastic. Well, again, congrats on the 10-year. That's a big milestone. And I'm not surprised that people thought you were crazy 10 years ago. The cannabis landscape has entirely changed in the past decade. So, but yeah, I think, congratulations on the 10-year. That's a big milestone, but also congratulations, I think, on all the work that you've done. I think it's really shown up, and it seems like things are really picking up for Rubicon, which is great to see.
I would add, it's a team effort. It's not just me. And I'm very thankful for the people I work with every day.
That's fantastic. Again, it takes a lot to build a good team. So I think that's also very solid. But I think just sort of looking ahead, I know we've covered a good amount in terms of some fantastic earnings. I think some interesting opportunities and interesting product offerings. But would love to kind of get a high level look. I know we are wrapping into the fall now. For the rest of the year, what are sort of the top priorities? Can you kind of refresh us? And anything that you sort of have on your radar as something positive or negative, coming up?
Well, positive certainly would be great to see some investor sentiment come back. If Mr. President Trump decides to move the needle there, be thrilled for that, and also for our compatriots in the U.S., the challenges that they've been through. We want to see a strong sector is good for everyone. So firstly, that would be very exciting. Secondly, I need to continue to tell our story, because as every CEO is going to tell you, they're undervalued, but I'm very proud of what we've built, and that I think it's a great opportunity to get into the company. Thirdly, we've got some lobbying work to do, honestly, with government, some local things to make sure we continue on the right track. And lastly, get our Hope facility and our new facility up and running. I'm very excited to walk in and see plants. It's nestled beside a river with a mountain coming down in a great new community that we haven't been part of. And I can't wait to see weed grown in it again. It's been dormant for a year and a half, hasn't had any weed in it. Let's get it ramping up.
Bringing it back, bringing that engine back to life. That's awesome. Love to hear it. Well, sounds like, again, sort of just some great growth, some great stories ahead in terms of what's going on with Rubicon. I think for, investors who have either been following you guys for a while, or people who are looking at the cannabis space and want to kind of get a sense of Rubicon and what you do in more detail, where would you point them? Where would you tell them to go to say, learn more and kind of follow our story?
Well, firstly, check out our press release we just released this morning and our earnings statements. We've got a deck that's online. We're doing a little refresh this fall, but you can find information on the company there, or you can reach out to ir@rubiconorganics.com, and somebody will get you over to me probably at some point. I'd love to chat to you, with an effort to take the last week before Labor Day off. But I am up in the mountains right now, and hopefully after we finish today, going for a nice swim in the lake.
That's great. Balancing a little bit of fun, but also I know working hard all the time, which is great. So I think that's
having a brand experience while I'm at the lake, probably, if I'm
honest. It's kind of work in some ways, I guess, whatever. That's awesome. I hope it's Blue Dream again.
It will be.
It will be. All right. You got to go to your faves sometimes. I think that's awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much again for taking the time. Really appreciate it. I think great to really highlight, an operator that's really doing well in the space. Again, looking at the numbers, that's been fantastic. So really appreciate the hard work from you and the team, and obviously for making the time to kind of talk to people today. So appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the day, and hope to chat with you soon. All right. Thanks so much.
You got it.
Thanks.
Bye.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.